Hey there, everybody. This is Gary from Constricted and Addicted. Hey, I hope everybody had a great holiday weekend. If you celebrate Thanksgiving, I hope you spend it with family, with friends, however you do it. If you ate too much, if you didn't eat enough, I know that I ate way too much food. As a matter of fact, like I go to the gym, I try to take care of myself. 2 days after Thanksgiving, I'm still eating way too much food. So I felt it was appropriate to do this video because we had a lot of family over. And of course, after we've all eaten and we're all sitting in front of the TV set and we're all just kind of comatose from food, right? I bring out Max, my Dumeral's boa, and he's just a big lap snake. So, I just brought him out. He laid on top of me. And of course, it provokes the questions from the family, And it's kind of funny because we all have these non-reptile owning friends that will sometimes ask questions that, they want to have the answers to. I guess that's what it is, They're uneducated. We are educated. So, but there's some questions that get asked more often than not, Some questions like, do they hibernate? Or, if they're in the S position, does that mean they're ready to strike? Some people ask those questions, but there are some questions that just get asked over and over again. And I felt like this was the video to address those questions. So my number 5 question that I'm going to start with is, people are always asking me, why do I like snakes? And it's a very long story to tell, but the reality is that I get enjoyment and I get fulfillment out of my snakes. When I hold them, when I bond, when we develop that relationship. And I think only reptile owners can understand that, because there's a lot of people out there who will argue the fact that snakes are not like dogs. They don't come when they're called. They don't purr when you pet them. But there's just another sense of form of bond, communication, trust, and respect between myself and this animal that I thoroughly get enjoyment out of. And I don't know, it's just the sense of I've had snakes for so long. So I truly enjoy my snakes, and I enjoy them more than a dog. I enjoy them more than cats. We do have dogs and cats here. And I don't interact with the cats and the dogs as much as I do with the snakes. So there's many different reasons to why I like snakes. But if it's like my family or someone close to me that's going to ask the question, I will go ahead and give them the long version that starts way back when I was a young little Gary and until what I'm at now. But the reality is that I get what I need with the companionship from a snake that most people would get from a cat or a dog. So question number 4 is, when I start talking to people about my snakes, I'll start talking about snakes in plural. I'll start telling people about different types of snakes I have. And of course, the next question is how many snakes do you have? I've got 15 constrictors in my possession right now, with one more coming after January. So I will have 16 constrictors in my collection. But why do I have so many snakes? A lot of people will ask, what's wrong with just one? Why do you have to have so many? And the reality is that I get a lot of enjoyment. Again, it goes back to my last question, is why do I like snakes? Is I get a lot of enrichment, I get a lot of fulfillment, and I'm really, I enjoy the different localities and the different morphs that the boa constrictor has to offer. So, I watch YouTube, I watch Instagram, I see you guys post about your animals, and you know what? It just gets me to the point with, hey, I would love to have something like that added to my collection. The reality is that I do not have so many animals in my collection that any of them get neglected. I sit and I've held today just alone, and I worked for most of the day today. I have handled at least 4 or 5 snakes today, and not just doing this video. Was sitting down with my wife, hanging out, walking around the house. I will have a boa around my neck. I'll have a boa outside. I'll be taking pictures. I'll put some of the snakes on my jungle gym. So all of the snakes are getting enrichment. And also with my new Super Dwarf retic, she just shed this morning. So I let her be while she shed. And this morning I had her out. Today was one of the best handling sessions that we had. So, it's one of those things where I get a lot of enjoyment out of all the different snakes that I have in my collection. And there's another thing about when you've got an animal in your collection, it's a little different than the rest. Like my boa constrictors, they're all docile. Every one of them, I have absolutely no problem with my boa constrictors. But this retic scares me. So what have I got to do? I have to build this relationship with this animal. So that's giving me the opportunity to spend more time with it and build that relationship. So not just my retic, but all of my animals, they get the same attention. I cycle through them, and maybe one animal will go, 1 or 2 days without being held because I'm cycling through the rest of my collection. But that's the first thing I do. I come in here and I don't have a schedule. I don't have them all written down. She or he gets held today. But what happens is I come in here and I look and I go, okay, I'm going to hold her, or I'm going to hold him. And I take them out and I'll hold them for like 40 minutes, just like this, hold them in my hands and let them hang out. So I have a lot of snakes, but I don't have so many snakes that I can't take care of them all. I have to be kind of careful here because Freya, who's in my hair, didn't want to go back into her enclosure, and I wanted to bring Adrestia, my hog island, out, and she's getting, this is really good. Anyhow, my next question is that do they live together? And the answer to that is absolutely not. That's one of the main questions I'll get from friends and from family is, how many snakes do you have in one enclosure? And I have one snake in one enclosure. As most reptile owners know, I have a separate enclosure for each one of my snakes. So no, they do not live together. And then it's like, why don't they live together? And the reality is that because there's just there's reasons why. And to the best of my knowledge and my recollection, I'm having a terrible time getting her out of my hair. To the best of my recollection, it might be because of territory. It's just not good to house snakes together. This is what I understand. There's only really one species, I believe, the garter snake. That is the only species that I'm aware of, and there's probably more that you can actually cohabitate. But boa constrictors, I've been told they do not belong together. And whether it's about me knowing the reasons why, I just do what I see and what I read about and what I hear about, and they do not live together. And that's, another question of areas is that, well, you've got so many snakes, where do you keep them all? And the funny thing is that it's easier to keep this many snakes as it is really for me to keep one snake because it doesn't take up a whole lot of room. I mean, we've got an extra bedroom that's really a reading room for my wife, and it's a reptile room. So, my snakes are all right here. We even got a tortoise right over here on the bottom that you can't see, and all of her books are behind the camera. So we've got all this room in here. She's got a chair right here that you can't see, and I've got 10 snakes in this room. So it doesn't take up a whole lot of room. Each one of them are in their own enclosure. And, my enclosures, since we're talking about enclosures, I'll talk about the new AP enclosures that I'm getting. I've got an 8-foot enclosure sitting in there that will span this wall back here. I've got another 8-foot enclosure sitting in a barn that will also span this wall right here. And then I've got 10 cages that will sit on top of those 2 8-foot cages. At least that's the plan. We're going to see what it looks like once I get there. But, when the family or friends ask, well, you've got so many snakes, where do they all live? The answer is they all live in separate enclosures. So, no snakes in my house cohabitat in the same enclosure. So the number 2 question that I've been asked many, many, many times is how long will a snake live? Reptiles in general have long lifespans. I'm not so certain about geckos. I think they can live for about 7 years. But I have a tortoise in my backyard right now that's 56 years old, almost 60 years old. I've got 2 sulcata tortoises in my backyard that are almost 20 years old. This Russian tortoise right here, I think is close to 17 years old. And snakes can live if you treat them well, they can live up to 30 years. I know that I've seen, between 20 and 30 years. And I do tend to get a lot of the information when I talk about stuff like this. It comes out of Vin Russo's book. And Vin does talk about that if you treat a snake right, it can give you 30 years of life. So this is a commitment right here. This animal can be with you for a very, very long time. So when people ask me, well, how long do they live? And I say, well, they can live up to 30 years. I mean, people get a little jaw dropped because cats and dogs typically live about half that. You can get, we have a cat right now that's 16 years old. And some of our dogs have crested 17 years old before they've passed. But when you've got a reptile that can get fairly large, and this is Bolana, she'll be 2 in next year. I don't remember what month, but she was born in 2020. She can get potentially 8 feet long, through 20 plus years of living. And that's a big snake with a big commitment. So, that's one of the things that I always take into consideration is how long is this snake going to live and how big is it going to get? And that's one of the reasons that I don't want to keep a mainland reticulated python. I do like them. I think I've had better interactions with the mainland because they're so domesticated. But the reality is that I think about what it looks like 20 years from now. And I'm 70 years old and I've got a snake that's pushing 16 to 20 feet long. I want to be able to handle and maintain that animal. If I'm going to live that long, to have an animal for that long. So, and no matter how big they are, I want to be able to still handle them and take care of them. So if you take care of your animal right, it will give you a very long life of pleasure. And of course, I think the number one question that I've been asked since being a reptile owner is, do they bite? And it's kind of funny is that this question will typically come from strangers, from friends, family members, somebody who's never held an animal before. The apprehensiveness they have of holding a snake, large or small, the first question is, do they bite? And one of the things that I can say about my collection is that, other than the super dwarf, and it's not the super dwarf's fault, it's never the animal's fault to me if I get bit. It's usually something I've done wrong. And I've been bit a couple times. And of those of us who are reptile owners, we know the difference. There's a feeding response bite and there's a defensive strike. And the defensive strike is basically being punched by the snake with its mouth wide open. So you're getting its teeth. It's not grasping onto anything. It's just hitting you and letting go. Usually just to say, hey, I don't like what you're doing. Don't touch me. It's its way of communicating with you that something's not right. Now, if you have a snake that has latched on and now it's trying to constrict around you, that's different. That's a feeding response bite. And I have never in my life have I ever had a feeding response bite. I've seen them on the internet, and I tell you what, it's a brutal thing, especially with a larger animal, something like Max or a reticulated python, or even any boa constrictor of over 4 or 5 feet long. If you get an animal that grabs on and wants to constrict, what happens is that, and this is another question that I typically get asked, but it's nowhere near as consistent as the last 4 questions that I've put out here, is that do they have fangs? Well, snakes don't, my snakes, boa constrictors, they're all non-venomous. None of them have fangs. But what they do have is rows of curved teeth. And when they do a feeding response bite and they clamp their jaws down on whatever area of your body that they get a hold of, if you try to rip that snake off, what happens is their teeth sink into your skin, and that's what really can create some damage if you try to rip that snake off. There's a lot of videos on YouTube for removing a snake with a feeding response bite, such as alcohol, running water in its mouth, credit cards, and so forth. But the difference is in being bit is if you're like doing something with the animal and something's wrong and it decides to do a defensive strike, Sometimes there's even a hiss with it as it strikes and comes back. It doesn't strike and latch on. And those are the bites you got to watch out for. But I've been bit a couple of times. I got bit by one of my ball pythons, and I got bit by the IMG motley that I had. So yes, and they don't feel good because a snake, a large snake, can have up to 200 pounds of force when it throws its body at you. So it's coming at you like a ton of bricks with its mouth wide open. And even if it doesn't latch on, it can still create some damage. Their teeth are serrated so that they can hit and scrape. So just a snake coming at you with full force can break skin. You can bleed. And like I said, a feeding response bite, way different. Usually, if you get a feeding response bite, that's because you didn't check your snake before you went in its enclosure. Most of my snakes don't associate opening up their bins or their enclosures with being fed. And that's only because I interact with them all the time. So I really have to put the animal, the frozen thawed rat, in front of it for it to realize, oh, hey, I'm being fed. And then its feeding response gets turned on. The retick's a little different. Super dwarf retic. And I think this can be said for pretty much all reticks. That once you open up their drawer, you touch them with a hook. And that's what I do is I rub my retic with a hook. It automatically perks up like, oh, hey, what's going on? I'm getting fed. It doesn't look at me like, oh, hey, baby, you want to hold me. It is looking at me like I'm getting fed. So that's why it's important to differentiate that feeding response and get rid of the feeding response so that when you go and pick that animal up, you don't get bit. So, hey, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I had to do this only because I had family over and there was a lot of questions asked about my snakes. And one of the growing questions is why do I have so many snakes? And a lot of people don't understand. And it might be because I'm an addict, right? And one is good and 20 is way better. So, and that's kind of how I think and I operate. I don't have one guitar. I have like 15 guitars. I don't have one snake. I have 15 snakes. So the reality is that's just how I'm wired. But I also understand that if I had so many animals that I started to neglect them, that wouldn't be a good thing. So I know that what I have in number is a good number for me. So, hey, you guys, I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. We'll be back. Thanks for watching. Thank you to all the new subscribers, people that are commenting. I love you guys. And thanks again. We'll see you.